Earlier today, Russia's war machine stalled, not at the front, but inside of Moscow. A quiet strike just paralyzed the Koltsevoy pipeline, the capital's main fuel artery. Ukrainian military intelligence, GUR, reports a successful operation on October 31st in Russia's supposedly secure rear. This 400-kilometer, 250-mile ring carries the three types of blood for war: aviation fuel for the airfields, diesel for the armor, and gasoline for the army. This is the new center of gravity. Fuel is movement. Interrupt the fuel, and the war machine hesitates. Tanks idle when there's no fuel. Airplanes sit on the tarmac, and the population of Russia begins to panic. Pipelines don't burn loudly, they fail quietly. And then everything slows. Break the fuel rhythm, and the entire war rhythm breaks next. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kiev Post and a national security advisor. This strike is nothing less than a strategic catastrophe for Russia's Air Force. This pipeline carried about 3 million tons of jet fuel per year. What makes it incredible is Russia only produces about 12.5 million tons of jet fuel. That means about 25% of the entire national output is now not able to be transported. This is the primary artery for Russia's strategic aviation bases. The ones in Moscow now are directly affected. This loss is immediate, and it cannot be replaced by other routes. This strike is going to paralyze the Moscow hub, the war's logistical command center. So Russia is clearly not doing well. In fact, the situation in Russia is getting worse by the day. And that's despite the fact that all the evidence that we have is that Russia wants to continue fighting this war. NBC News reported last week that U.S. intelligence believes that Vladimir Putin thinks that he can win. He's not interested in a peace deal, which is why, more than ever, we need to be backing Ukraine. Why, more than ever, it is time to bring Moscow to its knees. And the attacks like today's are helping to do that. So help me get this news to more people of what's really happening here on the ground where I am in Ukraine and what's really happening in Russia, a country that's losing to Ukraine. All I ask you to do is please subscribe to this channel. Check that you are still subscribed, because a lot of people say they've been unsubscribed against their will. Like this video, and please consider becoming a channel member today. Incredibly enough, we are getting closer and closer to reaching 250,000 subscribers. So I do appreciate greatly your support for this channel and for Ukraine. Things here in Ukraine are going increasingly well. We see that these reports from Ukrainian intelligence, they seem pretty impressive. Just consider this attack that happened just hours ago in the Ramensky district, southeast of Moscow. Now, what's interesting about this is that it was attacking one of the most critical hubs for Russia. This is a very large pipeline. It's a distance from Washington, D.C. to New York in equivalency. But it's something else that's very important about this. It is necessary for the defense of Moscow. Without this, it becomes much more complicated for the Russians. They must now rely on other things, transporting the fuel by train, transporting the fuel by truck. But all of that increases the prices. But not only does it increase the prices, it makes everything more complicated. Simply the quantity of fuel that they need in Moscow is incredible. Moscow, more than any other city in Russia, is using airplanes. And now, not having enough fuel for all of them, that's going to be a major setback. But there's something else here. Simultaneously, Ukraine is carrying out other attacks. And these other attacks will make the situation for gasoline and for fuel as a whole even worse for Russia. Consider this. This artery was fed directly from Russia's industrial heartland. Now, there's been reported attacks there as well. Look at the attack on the Ryazan refinery. That was processing about 13 million tons per year. Look at the attacks that have occurred on the Nizhny Novgorod facility. That was about 17 million tons per year. But today, Kyiv's intelligence chief says that the direct damage exceeds the effect of prior sanctions. That is to say that what Ukraine is doing now is more effective than papers that are signed in the West. Ukraine is making sure to permanently sanction these facilities to make sure that they are no longer able to transport the fuel that Russia needs to wage war. But there's something else that is occurring at the same time. We see that Russia is struggling because over 80% of Russia's oil transport is handled by pipelines. But today, the pipelines in Russia are being attacked by Ukraine. Regularly, we see now that these drone attacks deep inside of Russia are going after Russia's energy infrastructure. They are going after Russian oil. They're going after Russia's ability to refine oil. All of this is destroying Vladimir Putin's oil empire. Russia is a country that produces very, very little. Oil is the only product that is well known for. Outside of vodka, there's not a lot that the Russians do. So today, when these attacks are carried out, it not only is making it hard for the Russians to wage war, it's making it hard for the Russians to make money. The Russian economy is suffering as a result of this. The economy itself is already overheating. It doesn't have the capacity to keep going. And these attacks, every single day, are bringing Russia to its knees. But today we see that this lack of gasoline, it's something that the public realizes. The public is becoming more and more upset by seeing these gas lines, by seeing the fact that today commuters in Moscow are forced to stand in long lines, waiting to hope to fill up their cars. But there's another aspect of this. There's another reason that civilians are upset. Within Russia, the average citizen does not own a car. That's a luxury that few could afford. However, what the average citizen does have, and it really needs, is winter heating. But winter heating becomes very complicated when the fuel has been cut off, when there's not sufficient amounts. And today the government isn't really sure how to deal with this. We see that they are using Rosgvardia, the National Guard, as well as the regional police, in order to guard the pumping stations in the country. They're worried about fuel being stolen. We see that they are worried about the military not getting enough. And in fact, the military of Russia in the occupied territories has reported that locals are unwilling to sell them diesel. Now, there's already shortages there, of course, so it's not clear if this is directly a refusal or if there's simply no fuel. But the military, the soldiers, they believe that they're being refused. And that's a good thing. It's good that they don't feel welcome in the occupied territories. Well, we like to see that. But there's something else happening here, and this is important. We've seen that there's been a spike of fuel outages across the country, even in parts that probably should not be affected. So what's happening there? There's been no attacks near them, and logistically, they typically got fuel from facilities that have not been attacked. The reality is that Russia's entire fuel infrastructure is breaking down. They have their own problems domestically. We saw the explosion at the power plant in Sakhalin, which is an island in the far east of Russia. That's a good example of just Russian infrastructure imploding. It has nothing to do with Ukraine. Simply, the country is falling apart. And that's what happens after you have years of corruption. Today, the situation gets worse. Look at the attacks, though, that Ukraine is carrying out, that Ukraine can take credit for. But Russia has a lot to be worried about. These attacks are not one-offs, they are ongoing. Ukraine is no longer just defending, it is now systematically dismantling Russia's war industry from 1,800 kilometers away. Rolling drone waves now target Russia's north and its east with growing frequency. Moscow airports have repeatedly shut down as drone alerts ripple across the regions. Russia reported over 100 drones in a single night in a barrage that Ukraine sent over the border. What the effect was simply great. Power was knocked out in Sergeyev Posad, 70 kilometers, 43 miles from Moscow. That's a village for the upper class, the elites. They lived there. And guess what? They didn't have energy. After drone barrages, power interruptions followed in multiple regions of Russia. Local channels in Tula reported blackouts after explosions and interceptions. Officials confirmed ongoing interceptions and falling debris across the city. But the outages there, just north of Moscow, as well as in places like Tula, is something that's becoming commonplace in Russia. Across Russia, people are seeing more and more explosions, and at times it's hard to tell what caused them. Was it because of the Ukrainian drones? Or was it because of Ukrainian missiles? Or was it because of Flamingo? Or was it just because Russia is falling apart? Look at the explosion at the Plasmas munitions plant. That's located about 1,800 kilometers, which is 1,100 miles from Ukraine in the Ural Mountains. The plant made shells and fuses, and they were used for all of Russia's artillery. But what happened was it exploded. But why did it explode? It is still not clear. Some report that it was the Ukrainians, but others said it was just poor safety standards. And that's quite believable. Keep in mind, things in Russia routinely explode. Why they explode? Nobody knows. But if you follow Russian news, you've probably never seen so many large fires as when you're just reading the downtown news in Moscow. Routinely, things just seem to explode. But that's actually due to a couple of factors. One is the fact that nobody cares about safety regulations. Secondly, corruption. People like the fire marshal can easily be bought off. So if you can just pay off people for the safety inspections, why would you bother to keep up with the expensive regulations that say you should not keep flammable things with things that tend to start fires? No, nobody cares about that, and that's why things end up exploding. So being cheap or thinking that you're very clever can have long-term consequences. Look at the attack, though, at the Bryansk chemical complex. That attack was not small. That was very big. And that was a Storm Shadow. A Storm Shadow cruise missile was used to destroy that facility. Now, destroying that facility is important because Russia has many facilities that it has one of a kind. That chemical factory was one of a kind. It produced some of the compounds needed across Russia, specifically for the military sector. Without it, Russia has no replacement. This again is where Ukraine is being so smart. It's being strategic. Ukraine is going after the specific nodes, specific areas that cannot easily be replaced. Go after the ones that Russia has no backup for. There is no plan B. Like the attacks just outside of Moscow today, that's great because that is something that Russia has no solution for. It doesn't know what to do. So Russia, though, claims that it's still winning. And here's the absurdity of that. Let's look at the case of Pokrovsk. Now, Pokrovsk is a town that before the war had a population of about 60,000. That's about the size of Galveston, Texas. So it sounds like it's a serious city. But why it's important is because of this. It was used for rail. It was a rail hub. And sure enough, when there was the fighting still in places like Bakhmut nearby, it was necessary. It was the best way to get goods to the soldiers there. But today, it's been destroyed. There's nothing left. The area has almost been wiped off the map. Continual fighting for so many months has simply leveled the area. So today, what is the value of Pokrovsk? What does it really give the Russians? Well, the fact is, it gives them nothing. Today, it's no longer the rail tie between Dnipro and Kramatorsk. Today, it's not being used for that. So today, it's just a piece of land. Today, Russia cannot claim that it gained the city. It can only claim that it gained some ruins. So who's ultimately winning? Russia, who gained some ruins, has no more strategic advantage now than it did a week ago, or Ukraine, who is attacking near Moscow. Ukraine is attacking the very nodes necessary for Russia to wage war. And by doing this, by carrying out these attacks, it's creating domestic anger in Russia. The urban populations are not happy to see that there's going to be shortages this winter of fuel due to the fact that the fuel has to go to the front. They're not happy that over 1,000 flights were delayed or canceled during just July's disruptions alone by Ukrainian drones. They all see this, they all feel this, they see that this war is totally draining them. Urban commuters feel shortages before the troops outside the cities do. And so those urban commuters, those people that live normal civilian lives, are becoming angrier and angrier. And that's why the protests today in Russia are so important. The protests are increasing. The decision by the police to arrest singers in St. Petersburg who sang anti-war songs or decided to make a big show of Swan Lake, that's probably a decision they will come back to regret. Today, those decisions to arrest people have caused more young people to show up for protest, more young people to turn against the government. Today, the Kremlin is in an increasingly untenable situation. By needing to protect its rear, to have air defense back home in Moscow, it means at the front, there's less. That means that these Panzer launchers, the ones that are used for air defense in central Moscow, are so important. They're expensive, and there's a limited number of them. But today, because there's Panzers in Moscow, it means there are not Panzers outside of Pokrovsk. It means that today, the Russian troops are in an ever more precarious situation. And increasingly, Ukraine is successfully attacking them. Today, every battery near a pipeline is one less near a brigade. Rosgvardia, the National Guard, the police, all the others are now spending their time trying to guard valves, trying to guard pumps, trying to repair broken infrastructure inside of Russia. Each new blast by Ukraine is destroying the narrative of stability, the narrative of control. Russia now is reporting routinely that the attacks by Ukraine are effective. It can no longer hide this from the public. We've seen that refining losses went from 5% of the total to 20% by late summer. Now, it looks like nearly 40% of Russia's ability to refine oil has been destroyed. So looking ahead, what we can expect is this. We can expect to see that there's going to be more problems with the airlines in Russia, with the civil aviation, but also, of course, with the military. Now, a military that doesn't have enough jet fuel is a very unhappy military. That also hurts their logistics, their ability to transport from Moscow and the other parts of Russia to the front lines. So not being able to transport things within Russia, a massive country of 11 time zones, that's a pretty big setback. That's not small. And Russia has no easy solutions. It has no ability to work around this. There is nothing on the horizon that looks good for Moscow. So when we look at these attacks, we look at what Ukraine's doing, the strategy all comes together. It's very clear. It's very obvious what Ukraine is doing. Ukraine is making it impossible for Russia to wage war. But there's something else that Ukraine is doing. Ukraine is making it impossible for Vladimir Putin to maintain control, to be able to continue ruling his country. Today, the Putin regime is being challenged in ways that has never been challenged before. And the tension that we see inside the Kremlin, the fighting that we see inside the Kremlin, the fighting within the FSB is getting hotter by the day. And it's something we will dig into tomorrow. So today, let's look at what's really happened inside of Russia. A country at war with Ukraine, a war that is losing. Russian fuel is being destroyed. Its pipelines are being destroyed. Its oil refining capacity is being destroyed. The factories that produce the chemicals they need for refining or for their munitions, they're being destroyed. We see that the munitions plants, they're exploding. The power plants are also exploding. The substations are being attacked. And the Russian troops are running out of fuel. And those on the border of Ukraine, in places like Bryansk, are sitting in the dark with no energy. So today, no matter what the press says, it is Ukraine that is clearly winning. Gaining some territory of a destroyed village in Pokrovsk is nothing compared to bringing Moscow to its knees. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to this channel, watch this video, and consider becoming a channel member today. And also please do see the first comment below. A very generous donor has agreed to give a 50,000 euro donation, which he will match. So every donation you make, it will double its value. Please see the first comment and help the Ukrainian soldiers get life-saving drones. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.